The motion that the people before profit are going to put on private jets, that they would not be allowed, except in exceptional circumstances, Richard, is that so, to either fly in and out or overfly Ireland?
Yeah. I mean, for medical reasons or for military or political reasons, we accept that. But we have 7,000 private jet flights last year. That's up 150%. And one of those flights produces about 10 tonnes of carbon emissions. One human being, one person here, on average, produces 14 tonnes in the course of a year, right? So we're almost talking about one flight alone is as much carbon emission as what a person produces in a year. One flight is equal to about 40,000 kilometres of a drive. So it is a massive carbon output by the super rich. The average wealth of a person who owns one of these private jets is 1.2 billion euro, right? So this is very, very rich people taking completely unnecessary flights.
Jim? Well, it's not that exercised by it. People before profit are perfectly entitled to put forward legislation. My own view is that this legislation is extreme, and like all extreme legislation, it gets publicity, but I don't think it will make a good law, and I say that with great respect to Richard. Let's look at it. Not only are they trying to ban private jets landing in Ireland, but flying over Ireland. So anyone flying from the States to France or Britain would have to avoid Ireland. Would make Ireland an outlier. And we also need to recognise that this isn't just about private individuals. There's a lot of big companies that have private jets. We're dependent upon them for foreign direct investment. Part of the reason we have such large amounts of corporation tax is because these companies are investing in Ireland. If we start saying to them, you can't land in Ireland, you can't even fly over us, we're certainly sending a message to them that they're not welcome here, and we need to encourage foreign direct investment into Ireland.
Louise?
Yeah, I don't accept that point at all. In fact, it seems to me that the government are always terribly concerned about emissions when it comes to people on low incomes, who can't afford to retrofit their homes. They're never that concerned about emissions from the super wealthy. Sinn Féin had proposed in our alternative budget a €3,000 levy departure tax on private jets to ensure that they pay their way. That would have generated about €18 million per annum. But there's nothing coming from the government in terms of, it seems like they're quite happy for the private jets to land, to take off without any interference whatsoever. And yet at the same time, people who are struggling to heat their homes, people who are struggling to buy fuel, they're the ones who are going to be left to the end of the queue.
I'm wondering about the makeup of all these flights. I mean, I suspect many of them are so-called business flights rather than rich golfers flying in to play Trump down in Doonbeg.
You might suspect that, and I might suspect something else, but the government need to know, and they need to gather this data.
No, I'm just wondering, would that be Sinn Féin policy to row in with the people before profit
so what
bill?
We had proposed was a departure tax of €3,000 to ensure that there was a levy on it. And again,
so
we
Richard,
do need to look at where the emissions are coming
Make
from.
Make the super rich pay through the nose
first of all, I think the government and Jim should acknowledge there's an issue here. I mean, the richest 1% in the world produce 16% of the world's emissions, right? So, it's the low-income pensioner or working family who's terrified to turn on the heat during the winter because of the cost of that, which includes things like carbon tax and so on. So, ordinary people who are the least guilty of polluting our environment are the ones who actually suffer the cost of it. But then you have the super rich swanning around.
I fully accept. Of course, there's an issue here. My own view is that when it comes to changing human behaviour, the best way to do that isn't by criminalising it or banning it. It's by using incentives and disincentives, carrot and stick. And obviously, as well as that, we need to be encouraging technology and the use of green hydrogen in order to ensure that in the future, all airplanes, not just private jets, will have a much more carbon neutral capacity to travel around the world. Like, that is the issue that needs to be dealt here. If we start just presenting Ireland as a unique outlier where we've banned any smaller jets flying over the country.
Jim. They're discussing the same proposal in the French Parliament.
Can I just say, I've no objection to it being discussed, but I'm entitled to oppose it.
Jets, but
you're entitled to advocate it. I'm entitled to oppose it. I think it would make us an outlier.
Do you not think it's interesting, Jim, that other governments are concerned about private jets? Do you not suspect there's something a little bit a little bit off that your own government doesn't seem concerned in the
Well,
slightest.
I haven't done a review of every government in the world, but I do know that this government is the government that has been most concerned about reducing our carbon emissions. They've done more than any previous government, and in fact done a lot more than what Sinn Féin have advocated, Louise.
That's actually not true, Jim, and we can see year on year our emissions targets get failed every single
Last
time
words,
you
Richard.
set targets and you fail them
Richard.
all
A
of the time.
lot of the funding, for example, for grants to retrofit people's homes are heavily favoured towards those who already have money, whereas less well-off people can't afford to retrofit their homes. So, in fact, a lot of the government money that is supposedly dealing with climate action is, in effect, subsidising the very wealthy to
they're
retrofit
screaming
their
at me
homes.
to end this conversation. My thanks to Richard Boyd Barrett, to Jim O'Callaghan and to Louise O'Reilly.